Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It's Wendy Sellers, the HR lady. Welcome back to HR Empowerment. I am here with my co-host, JC. Hey, JC.
Hi there.
Hi. Happy 2026. I am so excited about our topic today. Today, we have Chris Berta, a partner at the Laurel Group. He brings over 24 years of experience in recruiting, sales, and marketing. Oh, none of those are stressful, huh, Chris? I love that you're connecting top talent with innovative companies. And I understand that you have a passion for that with visionary companies that's made you a driving force in fostering growth and innovation. So thanks for your time for today. Tell our listeners about yourself and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me on the show. So I actually came into it somewhat not planned. Two friends of mine had started the Laurel Group. They had been over at Heidrick Struggles, which is kind of the 800-pound gorilla of executive search. And they needed somebody that was at the intersection of marketing and technology. And so that's really where I had played up until that point. I had been at a company called Quantive, which Microsoft ultimately acquired. At the time, it was Microsoft's largest acquisition. And so I was there early on and helped build that. Then I was at Amazon and helped build their initial marketing or advertising capability, their ad tech platform, before it was even a vision for the company. And so I liked that space. And then they said, hey, we're building this startup again. Would you want to be a part of it? And so I ended up jumping on board back in 2004. I think my years are running together, but it was the same year that my oldest son was born. So that's how I can remember it. And it was interesting because at the time it was just a pure startup.
Right.
And then over the years, we've built out different capabilities, different consulting practices, all with the through line of having the executive network and communications. And that's really where the conversations start. Then we have different solutions that we've built over time to support their needs.
I love it. HR and digital transformation. Hello, 2026. We have arrived finally, right? And it's scary because that means so many cool things are happening, but then all the skills, the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we've been, making sure everybody they have to be updated. So I know I've been doing, AI trainings like crazy, and it's so important. But even just right before this show today, JC and I have discovered some issues with AI that is happening. Probably something is stuck in the universe. So we'll probably get through that. But I wanted to go back and mention, what an interesting career loop: recruiting, sales, and marketing. But you know what? In the big picture of recruiting it is sales and it is marketing. You still have to have the HR hat on. How have the experiences at companies like, Washington Mutual, Quantive, and Amazon, how have they shaped the way you think about recruiting and also building teams today?
Well, that's an interesting question because I could take it a number of different ways. But I think the one through line that I feel that came from those companies was building something from early stage. So when I was at Quantive, we were maybe 20 people when I started there. And then, ultimately, we grew, 500, maybe 1,000 people before it got acquired. Amazon, I was there when we were about 5,000 people, if I remember right. And both those companies, you saw what best practices of team formation looked like. And so you ended up seeing what works well and what doesn't. And it came down to, and this is what I think we do well here at the Laurel Group, is find the soft skill combinations that work best in specific team or specific company environments. And so it's not just finding the functional skills, because you can find that pretty easily, but it's matching the right cultural fit so that you end up building the right kind of environment for success. And it's fascinating because a number of the people that I had worked with at Aquantive, as the company, like I said, got acquired by Microsoft, have that right cultural combination. And even if the product's not a direct fit at the moment for that audience, there's a trust and there's a cohesion that allows them to make the pivots. And then they now can create those products that are going to be appropriate. And then now they've gone off and had successful companies that were built. So it really comes down to that cultural component and the soft skills that make teams successful. And I think I gained that from those different startups and watching them grow.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've worked with companies of all sizes as well. And startups, they're usually so passionate about their mission, their vision, and then their company values, how they want their culture to be. And then sometimes it changes because of money, and acquisitions and things like that. So it's good to hear that, you're like, you took that with you to those bigger companies. And I myself have written a couple books, and I'm just talking to 2 clients today, and I really, really dwell on company values. I'm like, they shouldn't just be something that are on a wall in a marketing, a sales meeting, or, hey, this is what we believe, but then they don't really act it. So you really do have to connect that into the recruiting and the talent search, even if it's internal, to make sure, do those people, do they comply with our expected behaviors, our AKA our company values, and or can they be taught? And that's hard. That's hard for recruiters to do, to assess another human being without really having a lot of information. So that kind of like brings me into my next question about what great talent really looks like now, today, 2026, with, over 2 decades in recruiting. What qualities do you believe differentiate top tier candidates in today's market? And the second part of that is, how has that changed over the last, I don't even 10 years, heck, 5 years?
Yeah. I think it's a natural curiosity. And so I think that's the through line of great talent, is a natural curiosity, because that will then drive them to understand that client that we're recruiting for and understand what their opportunities are, what their challenges are. It'll allow them to then ask the right questions about the opportunity, about the company's potential, where they're, and also have that introspection about themselves to know where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, and where I think good and strong candidates, over the years, they just have good knowledge of themselves and where their strengths are and where their weaknesses are, so that they can put themselves in the right environments to be successful. And I think the people that lack that introspection, they end up putting themselves, thinking that they can do something where they may not be able to, or they just don't understand their own blind spots, and then all of a sudden they aren't in the right environments for that success. And I think over the years, where the changes, or what how roles have expanded and so people's capabilities, and this kind of goes back to the natural curiosities, the functions have actually expanded in responsibility. So a marketer may have just in the 10, well, maybe 20 years ago, was more focused on creative and the brand aspects of marketing, right, and what that external view of that company is. And now it's also the analytics of marketing. And so they have to be both left brain and right brain in that CMO function and that marketing leadership function. Product management's the same function or same situation, where in the past it would have been, building a product, but you didn't necessarily have to have the depth of technology knowledge that a lot of product management leadership needs now. And so your function actually has expanded into some of the cross-functional areas of typically responsibility. And that has made the breadth of each role a bit broader. And so that there's a better communication aspect within that organization between product management and engineering, because there's understanding of both sides, marketing and analytics, so that the marketing person can talk to the CFO effectively. So it helps in the communication within the organization, because there's greater shared knowledge of each other's function and knowledge or requirements and what their needs are. And I think so somebody that has been successful is able to communicate to those cross-functional team members effectively, because they have a better understanding of what that partner's needs are and is going to be asking them about.
Awesome. Go ahead, JC.
Hiring top-tier talent remains a massive growth lever. Research shows that sitting within 25 feet of a high-performing A player, it can actually increase the productivity of surrounding team members by 15%.
I love that. And I've seen it happen. So I have so many questions now, though. And that, by the way, it was a stat that was in Forbes. So if you're sitting near an A player, you're more likely to be more productive. But now we're into the remote workforce. So that means I take it now as not just sitting, but on it, communicating with them all day long, which means everybody, including recruiters and HR and everybody in the world, marketing, needs to know how to use this technology so that we can say, yes, we're communicating, we're live, and we're not ignoring those Slack messages, right? What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
So when you're stating that stat, it reminded me of another stat that I had read. Scott Galloway is a podcaster, Prof G. And so he's over at NYU University, and he said something to the effect, you are the average of the 5 closest friends that you have.
Ooh.
And so if you think about that, if you surround yourself by brilliant people, you yourself will, by definition, be in that category. And so, yes, I think you need to surround yourself with great people and great talent who have the same aspirations you do. I think in a remote environment, it has to be much more deliberate. And so it takes a lot more energy to be that, because now you have to schedule these interactions. You have to schedule, right. You can't just walk down. And I'll use an example. When I was at Aquantive, this is early in my career, and I would just go down to I'd play video games. When we get done with our work, we'd play a video combat game with a bunch of, and this one guy was just fantastic and just would wipe us all off the map. But I built a relationship with him, so I could go down and ask him about different technologies. What's Java compared to HTML, compared to any other. This is early stage of web development, but it was understanding where the strengths are, weaknesses are of these different technologies, which nowadays, if I was in a remote capacity, I'd have to schedule a meeting with somebody that I may not know that well.
Yeah. And
that would take a lot of energy and a lot of ambition. And I may not get the same reception that I got while just walking down to somebody's cube and being able to ask a quick question. And so I think that's the challenge is, we end up needing to have these conversations, but it's much more challenging when communication should be easier, leveraging technology, and technology should be fostering those conversations better. I just haven't seen it as well as just being able to go down the hall and talk to somebody.
Yeah, it really is. And to be fair, also, like you mentioned early in your career, if you worked for smaller companies, you would know these people whether they were remote coworkers or they were in person. And then especially if you're new into a large company, it's going to be much harder to either get a meeting with somebody or even just go down the hall and say, hey, do you have a minute? Because they might be in 10 other meetings. So there's so many factors here. And I think, because of COVID kind of forced us all to get into remote and digital, even though we were heading in that direction, right, Chris? But we were forced, like, boom, everybody's going remote today. And you're like, okay, I don't know how to do this. And now we all, as adults, had to learn this whole, communication thing, that just because you're there just because you're, busting into somebody's office doesn't mean you're actually communicating. You might be annoying the heck out of them. I do want to get back to connecting, again, HR and digital transformation, but really talking about recruiting again, whether we're looking at as a sales aspect, a marketing, or an HR aspect. Recruiting is a growth lever. Many organizations, though, still see recruiting as a support function, and it drives me batty. How can HR and talent leaders position recruiting as a true strategic driver of business growth and innovation, with or without technology?
Yeah, isn't that funny that if you talk to a CEO or you talk to a board, you ask them what their greatest asset is, and they'll say their talent, their people, and yet it's not necessarily the investment area that these companies, I feel, need it to be. And so, how do companies make it more strategic? I think it comes down to the person and having the ability to communicate to the CFO, to the CEO, to the board on the strategic initiatives. And we've worked with HR leaders who have that function and that respect and that rapport with those leaders of that company. And if I think of Microsoft, the number of the people that have moved into that head of HR function over the years have actually come from other parts of the organization. They didn't necessarily just come up through HR. And I think they had built that reputation in these other areas and then moved into that HR leadership with that knowledge that they have a strategic mindset and could then import that into the rest of the organization. And so what they were able to do is talk about, how the market looks, what the cost is for specific skill sets. And if you think about a lot of these, especially in the technology space, where there's a bunch of acqui-hire happening, where companies are not necessarily, that they're acquiring a company, but it's really for the talent in that company.
Right.
And so how did that decision come about? It's really because the CEO or, the head of engineering, saw a capability that that other company had. And then they, talked with the head of HR and said, hey, look, we can either try to build this internally, and what kind of skills do we have on the, bench right now or on the team to be able to do this? Or will it be more cost effective to go and make this acqui-hire? And I just think that if the HR leadership is at that table, has a seat at the table in those decision-making processes for the company, then, I think that's a very successful company. If it's just a order taker, then that's not going to be effective, and the company, I think, is going to miss a lot of opportunities for them to grow effectively, or need to spend a lot of money to find these other companies.
Right.
From the HR Trends to Remember for 2026 blog published by awardco.com, business leaders are banking on AI to boost productivity by 23% in 2026. But unfilled roles for critical technical skills, those are projected to create productivity gaps that could potentially halt this growth. Back to you.
Yeah, it's AI is so fun, yet so dangerous, and so many risks. That's a whole other podcast for a whole other time. We won't get into that and go down that hill, but it is true. What are your thoughts on that, Chris, on that stat that he said, the cost of empty seats? Business leaders are banking on AI to boost productivity by 23%. That's a lot.
That's huge. And I hadn't seen that stat. I just, anecdotally, there's a lot of promise that AI has across companies, and boards are seeing this, and this, CEOs are trying to implement this. But there's I think a somewhat of a false promise of what AI can do, because we're still not at that stage where it is building out true, true, what's the word I'm looking for? Efficiencies.
Yeah.
Without having people monitoring it, and without having oversight, because there's still hallucinations, and there's still, just it hasn't become a savior for a lot of the different efficiency gains that people were promised, last year and then, this year. I think what you'll see is that, and companies are trying to do this from a groundswell, having their frontline people have everybody trying to use AI in certain ways so that they can see how it's going to impact them and their business and their function, their role, and then try to share that then with the rest of the organization. Yeah. I kind of feel like executives and board people are trying to say, hey, train your AI to be able to take away your job.
Right.
And so, but I think we're still a ways away from that truly happening. I mean, there's going to be certain areas of efficiency gains, and we see that ourselves. And like in coding, I've talked to different development managers. They say, the code can be written in AI or with AI, and it builds efficiencies there, but it's not taking away software developer jobs yet.
Yes. Yeah. I was just going to throw that in there. Yeah. And I truly hope for them that it doesn't, because we still need this human touch in marketing and sales, and especially in recruiting. I mean, I know so many people that are, looking for jobs right now just because of what's going on. And I'm teaching them how to use AI to help them look for jobs and to beat the bots that are autom. But it's not anything new. Well, it's new, but we've been using technology for a long time to help the recruiting team. But I find when I'm recruiting, and you probably have found this too, the best way to recruit is with a human. Using the technology tools to communicate, but you still got to, if you're not looking for a like a resume writer, then you got to give people forgiveness when their resume isn't that great. It's not when it's not written great. You got to look in there and say, what are the true knowledge, skills, and abilities? So that comes back to, what we originally were talking about in this last question is about using recruiting as a growth lever and not just throwing it back to technology and having humans in there and asking the right questions. I've seen so many companies screw up, like, oh, that's a crappy resume. And it's like, well, no, it's not written great, but that's not what their role is.
Right. Exactly. No, and I think it comes back down to, the communication, networking, and being able to, put yourself in those, if I'm a candidate, put myself in the environments and highlight those pieces that are appropriate for that specific job. If you're just, having an AI write a cover letter, write your resume for you, it's going to look generic, and it's going to look like everybody else's. And that's the challenge, especially at middle level or entry level roles. If everybody looks the same and they don't have a long track record of history to be able to show their accomplishments, and everybody looks the same, how is it? How do you differentiate yourself in that type of environment when there's thousands of other people that are applying for that same role? And really, it comes down to networking and getting to know that company, that hiring manager, figuring out who you can leverage to make those introductions, and then also showing your value to the company, not necessarily what the company can do for you, but what you can do for that company. And it it reminds me of the John F. K. slogan: "Ask not what you can do for your country, but what you can do for. Ask not what the country can do for you, but what you can do for the country."
Right.
And same sort of thing for a company. When you're talking to a company, is how are you going to add value to that company? And that's the perspective that you need to go into these conversations with. Is that you like the company, you like the promise that it has. Here's how I can help, because I've seen something similar in my history here, in my current company, or this is what I did in college as I was studying, and I think it could add interesting value to where you're looking to head.
Yeah, I completely agree. So for those people that are listening that are looking for jobs, definitely you need to make sure you're still human and be talking about metrics and everything like that. I'll talk about that in a second. But for the recruiters that are listening, you also need to be tuning in to say, you know what, let the candidates speak, but you need to be asking better questions. I saw a stat, I'm probably going to pronounce this company's wrong. It's called Mocha, Mokahr. And on their blog, they talk about people analytics. It's an IO company. And it says that companies that embrace data-driven workforce strategies see a 23% increase in operational efficiency. Nowhere in there did it say, oh, only if you're using robots. It's just saying you can still use humans to improve data-driven workplace strategies. So I want to talk a little bit about your lessons from early digital marketing. You helped shape Amazon's early online advertising capabilities. What lessons from those early innovation days translate directly to how HR teams today should approach employer branding and talent attraction today? You want to just recap that?
Yeah, the nice thing about being in those companies at the early stages of their development was that we were all empowered to be ambassadors for the company. So the employer branding came through almost naturally, because when we would go to different events or be just out talking to people, we knew we were a representative of the company, and we wanted to make sure that, especially in those days when both companies were really growing quickly, we were incented to be a recruiter in a lot of respects. Even though I was a client strategist at Quantive, I was a product manager at Amazon, I was empowered to be an ambassador for the company and help promote our hiring and get people that we felt were strong into the mix. And so we were empowered, we were given the right information and tools to be able to go and have those conversations. And I think, there's the phrase in sales, ABC, the acronym ABC, always be closing.
Yep.
And the same thing would happen in recruiting. So if you empower your entire workforce of always being closing on good candidates and profiles that maybe they're not even candidates, maybe they're just people that you meet through the business. Make sure that you give your employees the tools and resources and incentive to be going out and getting the right people into the mix. So it really is a guerrilla type marketing effort that you employ. The other thing about those two companies, they're so steeped in data. I mean, one of the initial phrases that we had at Amazon at Quantive was measure what matters.
Yeah.
And we're applying that to marketing, but the same thing can be done in recruiting as well, as making sure that what metrics you're trying to achieve and what are the true value metrics for the company, and what's going to resonate with like a CFO. And this is going back then to the conversation we were having about how do you make recruiting more strategic. You need to understand what the values are that the CEO values, what the CFO values, so that you can, as a HR leader, make sure that you're giving them the information, the data that's going to resonate with them so that they can make more strategic decisions based on your recommendations.
JC?
Take a look at early digital marketing shift towards transparency. 75% of Americans believe a company is more trustworthy when leadership communicates brand values and mission directly on social media. That's from Forbes.com.
Yeah, it's all about authenticity over, just fluff, right? And so this connects to HR, this connects to recruiting, and then as Chris, has already mentioned, it obviously connects to sales and marketing. Make your employees your sales and marketing team for future employees. Just make sure they know what they can and cannot ask, what they can and cannot say, and what they are allowed to actually, sell out there in the world. They can't just tell everybody, hey, come work at my company, I'll get you hired. We have laws, for and against that. But it's so important, augmentation and AI and digital transformation, it's scaring people. We really need to make sure that employees, no matter if you are in a company of 5 or 5,000, that your employees know that, hey, we're going to be using AI or other digital transformation to streamline processes, not replace employees entirely. So with that said, before we wrap up there, Chris, what's your advice for HR leaders, navigating change, specifically with technology, AI, and candidate or even internal candidate expectations? What's the one mindset or practice you believe will be essential for success over, I'll just say 2026?
Yeah. I think it's incenting creativity and incenting that mindset of trying out new things in this, leveraging AI in various ways. And it could be in your own personal life to use it in different ways. It's not going to go away. So we need to adopt it, but you need to adopt it in a smart way, knowing what it can do and what it can't do, and being curious about where it's going. We're trying to figure this out. Companies are still trying to figure this out. There's acquisitions that are happening daily almost in this AI space. And so where is this all going to settle out? No one really knows. So you need to be dabbling in it. You need to be using it in order to figure out how it's going to be most appropriate for you and in your function. I think as an HR leader, you need to incent that and take away that fear and make sure that people are seeing the value of it, recognizing that it still has constraints. And, this could then lead to breakthroughs that you have where it could be something that ends up being a major part of your success because you've been able to leverage it in ways that are unique that other people hadn't thought of. So it all takes that, I think, a curious mindset to be able to see where it's best employed.
Yeah, I love that. Before we wrap up, are there any resources that you'd recommend for listeners that are interested in diving more into digital transformation?
Do you mean like technologies that
or anything that you or your company offers?
I mean, we're working with a number of different companies that are in the AI. Since we focus in technology, we're working with some companies that are in the AI space. One company is called InLift. It competes like with a Zoom Info. We're also working with a public company called Bloom Energy, which is powering the data centers and all the different with fuel cells. So it's a green technology because it has no emissions, but it takes natural gas and converts it to electricity. So that's a fascinating company, and they're going to explode here. 2025 was good for them, but I think 2026 is going to be even bigger. So that's another one that's quite compelling. We use different technologies right now. LinkedIn's trying to employ a lot of different AI tools and capabilities within their systems. Some are, I think, better than others. And then we use a tool called Clue.ai. So that's been helpful. I'm meeting with a friend of mine here in Seattle who's starting a company that's also in the HR space, leveraging AI. Another friend of mine had started a company called Humanly.io, which has gotten some good traction in the HR space. And I've been advising some companies as well that are looking to explore AI especially in the HR space. So it's fascinating to see how the different ways that AI is being employed in this area, because it's really fragmented right now.
Yes.
And it's just going to be, it's kind of like, I don't know, back in the early internet days, you had all these different point solutions, if you will, or just features really that companies were trying to then build into products, but really they were features. And so then all of a sudden they got gobbled up and they got consolidated into a larger company. And I think the same thing's going to happen now, where we see a lot of companies that are more like features that will then be rolled into a larger company over time.
Well, thank you for that. There's definitely some research that I need to do there, being the AI geek and HR lady that I am here. Well, Chris Berta, thank you so much for sharing all of this information. Everybody, I will make sure that his LinkedIn profile is in the podcast description. I hope this podcast has been beneficial to you. It's definitely given me some things to think about. Thanks for joining us. Take care, everyone. And thanks again, Chris.
This has been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.